I froze in the hallway outside her office, my name still on her lips. She actually thinks she can make a living fixing old houses, my mother said, her tone light but laced with scorn. Poor Rose. She just doesn't have what it takes. My father's voice followed, calm, measured. Let her dream for now. She'll come back when it all falls apart. Something in me cracked, not loudly, quietly, like a small frame falling off a wall. They hadn't seen me yet. I was standing by the door, clutching the folder I'd brought, my latest sketches for the town library renovation. I'd come to show them what I'd been working on, to prove I was moving forward, to share something good. Now the papers felt heavy in my hands, pointless. I turned to leave, but the floor creaked under my shoe. My mother looked up. Her smile faltered. "Rose," she said, startled. "You're early." I forced a breath. "I was dropping these off." I placed the folder on her desk, careful not to look at her eyes. She tried to soften her tone. "Oh, honey, we didn't mean—" "Don't," I said. My voice shook, but I didn't raise it. "You meant every word." My father stood, buttoning his jacket. "We just want you to be realistic. You're wasting your talent out there. Maybe my talent doesn't look like yours." The silence that followed was thick, like the moment before a storm breaks. I walked out, each step heavy with the weight of what I just heard. Outside, the air smelled like rain and cut grass. The town square buzzed quietly, people running errands, cars passing, a world moving forward while mine stood still. I sat in my truck and stared at the old library across the street. The boarded windows, the faded brick, the ghosts of its past. I used to go there as a child, curling up by the windows with books my parents thought were a waste of time. Now it was crumbling, just like whatever I'd been hoping to rebuild with them. That night, I lay awake replaying every word. She doesn't have what it takes. It echoed until something inside me hardened. Maybe they were right. Maybe I wasn't built for their version of success. But I was built for something. Days passed. I threw myself into work, sanding floors, sketching blueprints, learning to breathe again through sawdust and paint fumes. The world of old wood and worn stone didn't judge me. It waited patiently, letting me fix what was broken. Then, one afternoon, as the autumn light stretched long across the street, my phone buzzed with a message from an old neighbor. "Your parents are downtown with Mr. Callahan. He just bought the library building. Big plans for it." My heart skipped. Mr. Callahan, their wealthiest client. If he was taking over the library, it meant development, modernization, probably demolition. I dropped my tools and drove. From across the street, I saw them. My mother, radiant in her cream blazer, my father, charming as ever, and Mr. Callahan shaking their hands beside the faded library doors. They were smiling, the same smiles they used at charity events and business deals. I stayed in my truck, watching, listening. Through the rolled-down window, I caught fragments of their conversation. "It'll be a beautiful event center," my mother said. "We'll connect you with the best designers in the city." "Something new," my father added. "This town needs a touch of modern class." Something burned in my chest. Not anger exactly, more like grief. The kind you feel when you realize the people you love will never understand what matters to you. Because I didn't want the library gone. I wanted it restored. Its old bones, its creaky staircases, its stories. I'd spent years sketching how to bring it back. And now they were offering it to someone else, selling the heart of the town for another glossy headline. I sat there until they drove away. The street grew quiet again. The sky dimmed to amber. Then I climbed out, walked across the cracked sidewalk, and pressed my palm against the library's brick wall. It was cool beneath my hand, solid, waiting. "Not yet,"
I whispered. The idea came suddenly, bold, dangerous in its simplicity. If they wouldn't see me as capable, I'd show them, not through words, not through arguments, but through what I did best. I'd bring the library back to life myself. And when they finally saw it, when their biggest client saw what I could do, the truth would speak louder than anything they'd ever said about me. I didn't want revenge. I wanted peace. But peace, I realized, sometimes starts with proving you're more than what they named you. The town lights flickered on behind me. In the glow, the library stood like a secret waiting to be told. And I, for the first time in my life, was ready to tell it.
I used to think love could hold a family together, that no matter how different we became, the history we shared would anchor us. But love without respect is like paint on rotting wood, bright for a while, then peeling away. When I was a child, my parents weren't cruel. They were busy, always somewhere between open houses, charity luncheons, and clients who called them the perfect couple. My mother dressed in crisp white and always smelled like lavender and ink from her ledger books. My father had that smooth, professional smile that could make anyone trust him, and I worshipped them. I remember sitting at the top of the staircase, watching them host dinners, my small sketchbook balanced on my knees. I drew the guests' faces, the shining silverware, the way my mother's bracelets caught the light. When she saw my drawings once, she smiled politely. "Pretty, Rose, but maybe you should try something useful next time, like a floor plan." She didn't mean to hurt me, but she did. My first heartbreak wasn't about love. It was realizing my parents didn't understand me, and maybe never would. Years later, when I told them I wanted to study design, they laughed like it was a phase. "You're too soft for that world," my father said. "You'd be better off in sales. You have a nice smile." I enrolled anyway, paid my own tuition by working evenings at a diner. They came to visit once. My mother wrinkled her nose at the tiny apartment. "You live here?" "It's what I can afford," I said. "You could come home," she offered half-heartedly. "Help us at the office. Learn the business." I shook my head. "That's your dream, Mom, not mine." We stopped talking much after that. I sent postcards now and then, small updates, sketches of places I was restoring, stories about towns where people still waved to each other. She never wrote back, but she kept the postcards. I found out later she showed them to friends, calling me her creative one, with the kind of pride that sounds like distance. Then came the summer I returned to our town. I had finished a modest restoration job, a bakery downtown that used to be a post office. When it reopened, the local paper ran a short article about it. Just a few lines, but enough to make my heart swell. That's when my father called. He said, "We saw your little project. Nice work." His tone was polite, not proud, but it was something. I drove to their house the next weekend. My mother met me at the door, smiling too widely. "You look tired, dear. Are you eating properly?" I laughed, working too hard probably. She led me inside. The house was the same, spotless, silent, filled with the scent of polished wood. My father was on the phone, pacing, talking about a new client. When he hung up, he nodded at me. "You still doing the old house thing?" "It's more than that. It's preservation. I'm helping people see the beauty in what they already have." He smiled, thinly. "Romantic notion, but beauty doesn't pay bills." That was the moment I realized what I'd lost wasn't just their approval. It was the bond we'd once had, the easy trust between us. They didn't see me anymore, not as their daughter, not as someone building a life of their own, just as someone failing to live theirs. When I left that day, my mother hugged me, but it felt rehearsed, like a gesture for an audience that wasn't there. Back in my truck, I looked at the house through the windshield. It used to be my home. Now it was just a place filled with their expectations. I told myself I was done needing them, that I'd let go. But standing at the library days later, seeing them with Mr. Callahan, I realized I hadn't. Not really. A part of me still wanted them to believe in me. As I stared at the building that day, a memory flickered. My mother's office door slightly open years ago, her voice drifting through. If she doesn't start focusing, she'll embarrass us. Embarrass. That was the word. Not disappoint, not worry. Embarrass. All those years, I thought their coldness came from concern, but it wasn't. It was pride, fragile, trembling, wrapped in the fear of how others saw them. And I'd been carrying that shame like it was my fault. That night, I went through my old drawings, every line I'd ever made of the library, notes, measurements, little dreams scribbled in the margins. In the corner of one page, something caught my eye. My mother's handwriting. She'd written it years ago when I'd shown her the same sketch at the dinner table. "You always draw things that are falling apart," she'd said. "Why not draw something worth keeping?" But reading it now, I saw what she couldn't. The things falling apart were the ones worth saving. And that realization felt like light breaking through dust. The betrayal wasn't just that they'd given up on me. It was that they'd forgotten what mattered most. The kind of beauty that doesn't need to be sold to be real. I looked up at the blueprint pinned to the wall. The old library's shape stretched across the paper like a sleeping giant. It wasn't gone yet. And neither was I. I picked up my pencil and drew the first line of the plan that would change everything. The next morning, I returned to the library. The town was quiet. The sky a pale blue that promised cold by evening. Dew clung to the cracked sidewalk as I set down my coffee and unlocked the rusted gate. The key wasn't mine. Bill, the carpenter I'd once worked for, still had access to the property for maintenance. When I told him what I wanted to do, not tear it down, but study it, sketch it, prove its worth, he nodded without question. "You always did see beauty where others don't," he said. "Go on, Rose. Remind them what they've forgotten." Inside, the air was thick with dust and history. Light fell through broken panes like thin gold ribbons. Every sound echoed. My footsteps, the groan of old wood, the quiet beating of my own heart. This place had been my refuge once. Now it was my battleground. I set up my drafting table near the front window and unfolded my newest blueprints. They were cleaner, sharper, refined from the sketches I'd done years ago. Every line carried intention. Every angle held quiet defiance. I wasn't trying to destroy my parents' reputation. I just wanted truth to surface, the kind they'd buried under perfection and profit. Day after day, I worked, measuring beams, tracing wall frames, gathering photos from the town's archives. People began to notice. The florist next door, the baker down the street. They'd stop by with coffee or questions. "What's happening to the old library?" they'd ask. "Just studying it," I'd say, trying to show what it could be. And slowly, a quiet kind of hope began to stir. Each night I'd leave tired but steady, my hands rougher, my spirit clearer. The pain from my parents' words no longer stung. It fueled me. One evening, while reviewing old town permits, I found something curious. The library deed had a preservation clause from decades ago. It stated that the building couldn't be demolished without a community review. My parents hadn't mentioned that. Maybe they didn't know. Or maybe they chose not to. I read the paper twice, my heart racing. This wasn't revenge. It was justice. Quiet and clean. I photocopied the document and slipped it into my folder. Later that week, I received an unexpected call. Rose Marshall? Mr. Callahan's voice was calm, courteous. I've been hearing talk around town about someone drawing up plans for the library restoration. That wouldn't be you, would it? It might be, I said carefully. I'd like to see your work, if possible, tomorrow. When I hung up, I stood still, staring at the blueprints on the table. After all these years, I finally had a chance to prove my vision. Not to my parents, but to myself. The next morning, I walked into his office with my folder pressed to my chest. The receptionist led me to a sunlit room lined with photographs of buildings, new, gleaming, and heartless. Mr. Callahan stood by the window, turning as I entered. He smiled. "You're the Marshall's daughter." "Yes," I said, "but this isn't their project. It's mine." I laid my designs on the table, drawings of the library as it could be. Lights spilling across restored floors, children reading in sunlit corners, the town's past stitched into its future. He studied them for a long time. "You did these yourself?" "I did." "They're beautiful," he said finally. "And honest. That's rare." Relief loosened my breath. "I'll be in touch. You've given me something to think about." When I stepped outside, the air felt lighter. The bell over the florist's shop chimed softly in the breeze. For the first time in years, I walked through town with my head high. But peace didn't last long. 2 days later, my mother showed up at the library. Her car door slammed like thunder. She stepped out, heels clicking on the pavement, eyes sharp. "Rose," she said tightly, "what are you doing here?" "Working," I replied. She glanced at my blueprints spread across the table. "Mr. Callahan told us he met with you. You went behind our backs." I sent him my plans. He wanted to see them. "This is our client, Rose. You could ruin everything." "No, Mom," I said quietly. "I'm trying to save something." For a moment, her mask slipped. Fear flickered across her face. Fear of losing control. Not me. "You don't understand how this business works." "I understand enough. I also found the preservation clause in the deed. The town has to review any demolition, so maybe you shouldn't promise what you can't deliver." Her expression froze. "You wouldn't." I met her eyes. I would protect what matters. She stepped back, her voice lower now. "You've changed." Maybe I finally grew into who I was supposed to be. The silence that followed was cold, but clean. She turned and walked away, her heels sharp against the stone steps. I stood there until her car disappeared down the street, the weight of years lifting from my chest. The library stood behind me, bathed in late sunlight. The windows glowed like eyes just beginning to open. In that moment, I knew. Something had shifted. My parents had spent years controlling every story in this town. But this one, mine, they couldn't rewrite. And they were beginning to realize it.
The day after my mother's visit, the town paper printed a small notice about the library. Community review scheduled for historic site redevelopment. Just one paragraph, tucked between school board updates and weather forecasts. But it was enough to turn quiet whispers into talk. By noon, people were stopping me on Main Street. "Rose, is it true they can't tear it down without a hearing?" "That's what the record says," I'd answer. It belongs to the town before it belongs to anyone else. Each question, each nod of support, built something stronger than anger. purpose. By the time the meeting arrived, the whole town seemed to hum with curiosity. The council chamber smelled of old paper and coffee. My parents sat near the front, polished as ever, their briefcases resting neatly by their chairs. Mr. Callahan sat beside them, calm but unreadable. I took a seat at the back, my folder of plans resting in my lap. My heart beat quietly, not in fear, but in certainty. When the meeting began, the mayor cleared his throat. We're here to discuss the future of the old library. The marshals have proposed redevelopment. However, a preservation clause requires public review. My mother stood. "We only want what's best for the town," she began smoothly. "The building is unsafe. Modernization will bring new business, new life." I raised my hand. "May I speak?" The room turned. She froze for a second, then stepped aside. I walked to the front, my voice steady. "The library isn't unsafe. It's neglected. There's a difference." I spread my drawings on the table. Gasps rippled through the small crowd. Images of the library alive again. Sunlight through new glass, children and families in restored rooms. "This isn't nostalgia," I said. "It's heritage. We can rebuild without erasing what made us who we are." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Mr. Callahan leaned forward. "I've reviewed both proposals. Rose's plan honors the building's history, and it's financially feasible. I believe that's the future this town deserves." My mother's smile didn't falter, but I saw it, the tremor behind her eyes. When the meeting ended, the crowd lingered. People shook my hand, some clapping my shoulder. "You did good, Rose. Real good." I thanked them, but my eyes stayed on my parents. They stood by the window, their posture too straight, too still. I waited until the room emptied before walking over. My father spoke first. "You made quite the impression." I wasn't trying to. I was telling the truth. He studied me for a long moment. "You've changed." I had to. My mother finally looked at me. Her voice was soft, careful. "You embarrassed us today." I almost smiled. "That's what you're worried about?" She blinked as if I'd spoken another language. "I didn't come here to ruin your deal. I came to protect something real. The library matters, not because it's old, but because it reminds us who we are." "You don't understand the cost," my father said. "I understand exactly," I replied. "You taught me to measure everything by numbers. But some things can't be priced." The silence that followed wasn't angry. It was tired, worn from years of pretending everything was fine. Finally, my mother's voice broke the air. "We just wanted you to have an easier life than ours." I met her eyes. "You wanted me to have your life." She didn't deny it. For the first time, I saw her, not as someone powerful, but as someone scared. Scared of fading relevance, of being forgotten in the story she built. "She thought success would protect you," she said quietly, "that it would make people respect you. Respect isn't given by what we own, it's earned by what we stand for." Her hand trembled slightly on her purse strap. My father shifted beside her, his jaw tight. "Mr. Callahan shows your plan," he said. "You got what you wanted." "I didn't want to win," I said. "I wanted you to see me." He didn't answer. Neither did she. I gathered my papers and turned toward the door. "Rose," my mother called softly. I stopped. She hesitated, the words fighting to leave her throat. "Your drawings, they were beautiful." For a moment, everything stilled. Years of hurt, of distance, folded into that one fragile sentence. "Thank you," I said. They were honest. I stepped outside into the cool night air. The sky stretched wide above the town, dark and endless. Behind me, the council lights glowed through the windows, a quiet fire that marked the end of something old. I knew they'd go home tonight and talk,
maybe argue, maybe sit in silence. But something inside them would shift, the way truth always does when it's finally spoken aloud. And as I walked down the empty street toward the library, I realized the story wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about remembering who I'd been before they told me I wasn't enough. And in that remembering, I'd found freedom.
A week after the council meeting, the town felt different. People nodded to me on the street. Some even smiled. The library had become a symbol again, not of neglect, but of hope. Yet, peace didn't come easily. It never does. I spent my mornings at the site, sketching, measuring, planning the next stage of restoration. Every now and then, I'd catch my reflection in the dusty window glass, a little older, a little steadier. But beneath the calm surface, questions still pressed against my ribs. Why had my parents fought so hard to control this project? It wasn't just pride. Something deeper lingered behind their silence. That answer came on a gray afternoon. Bill handed me an old folder he found tucked inside a cabinet at the back of the library. "Thought you'd want to see this," he said. Inside were papers, receipts, blueprints, letters dated almost 20 years back. My parents' signatures were on several of them. The documents detailed an earlier renovation bid for the library, one that had failed because of budget issues. But one note caught my eye, my mother's handwriting. "If this project collapses, the firm could fold. We can't afford another loss." My chest tightened. They had tried once before to save this place, and it had nearly ruined them. Maybe that's why they'd turned away from preservation, not because they didn't care, but because they'd been burned by it. For years, I'd seen them as heartless, obsessed with money and status. But the truth was more human. They were afraid. That evening, I drove to their house. The porch light was on, warm against the fading sky. I hesitated before knocking. My father opened the door, surprised. "Rose?" I asked. "Can we talk?" He nodded and led me to the kitchen. My mother sat at the table, sorting through a stack of mail. Her eyes flicked up, cautious, but softer than before. I placed the folder between us. "Bill found these at the library." She froze, her hand hovering over the papers. "I thought those were gone." "I didn't know you'd tried to save it once," I said quietly. My father sighed. "It was years ago. The town wouldn't back us. We lost money, clients. My mother spent months trying to keep us afloat. And after that, we stopped taking risks we couldn't control." I understood now. Their caution wasn't cruelty. It was fear, disguised as certainty. "You thought I'd fail like you did," I said. Her gaze met mine, steady but full of regret. "We didn't want you to suffer through what we did. When you talked about restoring buildings, it brought it all back. We couldn't watch you go through that pain. So you tried to stop me, even if it meant breaking me instead." She looked away. "We thought it was love." The quiet between us stretched, filled with everything we hadn't said for years. My father spoke first. "You've done something good, Rose, better than we ever did. I see that now." It was strange hearing those words from him. They didn't erase the hurt, but they built something fragile, a bridge maybe. "I didn't want to beat you. I just wanted you to believe in me." My mother's eyes glistened. She reached for the folder, tracing the edges of her old handwriting. "You've reminded me what it means to care about something for the right reasons. We lost that somewhere along the way." Her voice cracked, not from weakness, but from truth.
I thought of all the years we'd spent talking past each other, chasing approval we didn't need. I wanted to forgive them, to start over, but part of me still ached. Maybe forgiveness takes time, like restoration. You have to strip away the damage layer by layer before the real surface can breathe again. I stood, taking a slow breath. I'll invite you both to the reopening ceremony. You should see what this place becomes. My father nodded. We'll be there. As I turned to leave, my mother's voice followed. Rose, thank you for not giving up on it. I looked back at her. That's the difference between us. You gave up on the building. I gave up on being afraid. Outside, the night air felt cool and sharp. The stars glimmered faintly over the rooftops. I drove past the library on my way home. The restoration lights glowed softly inside, golden against the dark, like a heartbeat. I parked for a moment, watching the windows. Inside, the scaffolding cast long shadows against the walls, shapes that looked almost alive. Tomorrow the contractors would arrive. The town council had approved funding. Everything I'd worked for was becoming real. But one question lingered. Could I truly forgive them? Not just with words, but with heart. The thought hung there, delicate and unresolved, like the dust swirling in the moonlight through the broken glass. And I knew the answer would come, not in a single moment, but in the quiet work of rebuilding, brick by brick, breath by breath, until the past finally made peace with what remained.
The reopening day came with sunlight pouring over the town square. It was the kind of morning that seemed to forgive everything that came before. I arrived early, walking up the old steps of the library, now restored to its quiet grace. The stone shone softly, the doors freshly varnished, the windows clear for the first time in decades. Inside, the scent of new wood and polished floors mixed with something older, the faint, sweet trace of paper and memory. I ran my fingers across the main desk where I used to sit and read when I was a child. The town plaque gleamed nearby, engraved with new words. Restored through community spirit and the belief that history still matters. There was no mention of my name, and that felt right. This was never about glory. It was about returning something broken to its place in the world. As the guests arrived, laughter and low conversation filled the hall. Townspeople, students, even a few of the council members who had once doubted me. And then, near the back, I saw them, my parents. My father's suit was neat but simple. My mother wore a soft gray coat, her hair pinned up like it used to be when I was little. They looked around the library as if seeing it for the first time, not as a project, but as a living thing. I felt my heart slow. There was no anger left in me, only understanding. When the mayor called me up to speak, I hesitated for a moment. Then I stepped forward, my voice steady through the microphone. This building stood for nearly a century. Then time and neglect began to tear it down. We could have left it behind, said it wasn't worth saving, but something in me couldn't let it go. I looked toward my parents as I spoke. Sometimes the hardest things to rebuild aren't made of stone or wood. Sometimes they're made of the things we stop believing in: trust, hope, each other. A ripple of quiet passed through the crowd. My mother lowered her head slightly, her hands clasped in front of her. I finished with a small smile. Restoration takes patience. It takes faith, and sometimes it takes failure before we can see what truly matters. The audience clapped softly, not the loud kind that demands attention, but the warm kind that wraps around you.
Afterwards, people came up to shake my hand and thank me. I smiled, nodded, accepted their kind words. But when my parents approached, the noise around us seemed to fade. My father spoke first. "It's beautiful, Rose. You did what we couldn't." "Maybe you could have," I said gently. "You just stopped believing you could." My mother's eyes shone with quiet tears. "We're proud of you, Rose. Truly." I nodded, not because everything was fixed, but because peace doesn't always need fixing. Sometimes it just needs space to exist. They stayed for a while, walking through the rooms, touching the walls they once saw as failures. Then they left together. Not triumphant, not defeated, just human. And that was enough. When the crowd dispersed, I lingered alone by the tall windows at the back. The sun slanted across the floorboards, and in the light, a small beam caught on the dust still drifting through the air. It looked like gold, suspended in motion, fragile, eternal. I pulled out a letter from my coat pocket. I'd written it weeks ago, addressed to myself. A reminder for when the noise was gone. You didn't need to prove them wrong. You just needed to stay true long enough for the truth to find its own way out. I smiled and slipped the letter into the hollow of the library's old pillar, sealing it behind a loose stone. Let it stay there, part of the building, part of the story. Outside, the wind carried the faint sound of laughter from the square. Children ran past, their voices echoing where silence used to live. I stepped out onto the steps, the light warm on my face. Across the street, my parents' car pulled away slowly, turning down the hill. My mother glanced back once through the window, her expression unreadable, but soft. I raised my hand, not in farewell, but in quiet recognition. The wind lifted my hair as the last of the cars disappeared. I looked back at the library, its doors open wide to the day. The place that once marked my failure now stood for something else. Resilience, forgiveness, the quiet kind of success that doesn't need applause. That was enough. That was everything. Sometimes the greatest revenge is peace, the kind that doesn't need to be seen to be real.